Hello, my name is Michael O'Keefe, aka The Movie Wist. If you enjoy this interview and want to hear more top-notch film industry conversations, please press the thumbs up, subscribe to this channel, and hit the bell to stay in the know. Hello, Amelia Moses. Why did you want to make your film Bloodthirsty?
Getting straight in there. I like it. I was given the script by one of the producers, Mike Peterson, because we'd been kind of put in touch about some other stuff, and he was looking for a director. And I guess what struck me about the script was just this really interesting kind of parallel, but also contrast between these horror creature transformation elements and this woman writing this really beautiful album and kind of this creative process and this kind of creative ambition, and the way those two things kind of intersected, I thought was a really strong premise and had a lot of opportunity for some rich themes.
Cool. So I'm always wondering, when we see horror movies, obviously it's freaky stuff and it's a lot of fun. It's a fun cleanse, I think. But what was it like making this? What was the shoot like? Were there unsettling moments?
Yeah, I mean, so much of that tension is built in post, through music, through sound. Just they contribute so much. So I don't know if we had any experiences where it was particularly creepy on set or anything like that. I guess it was more fun in terms of some of the prosthetics or some of the kind of bloodier moments. Those are always, I find, really fun on set, because especially if you're using practical effects, like you're just seeing it, then and there. So it's fun.
Cool. That's good. So I enjoyed your other film, Bleed With Me, which played at
Thank you.
Fantasia. Yeah. Yeah, it was fun. So it was fun going on IMDb, and it was like, oh, this person made that. I've seen that movie too.
Oh, okay, cool. Yeah.
Yeah. So I'm wondering though, do you have horror fatigue? Are you exhausted by the genre?
Oh God, no. It's, there's such a plethora of things to explore in terms of tropes or narratives or subgenres. Like there's such a wide variety of things you can kind of do in horror, and that kind of makes it endlessly exciting. Because you can just do so much, and you can mix and match and have different approaches and stuff. So I think it's a pretty open place to play around.
Okay. So I'm going to get you to play a psychologist for a little bit. Why do you think people enjoy horror movies?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's that classic thing of people wanting to be scared, and the idea that you're being scared but in a safe place, because you're in a movie theater and you're in the world of the film, but you can leave afterwards, right? So it's this kind of moment to feel something we might not feel in our like everyday lives. But for me, I guess, like, I don't know, it's just an opportunity to explore really kind of dark parts of humanity. And because it's in a package that's not necessarily focused on realism, it's focused more on, a heightened experience, and like it's very much like a movie. I mean, there's some horror movies that are maybe trying to achieve something that feels more real, but a lot of times it's more about this kind of like outward expression. And so I think it's, again, I guess it's similar to this being scared thing. It's an opportunity to kind of look at maybe quite dark subject matter that in a different package might be harder to look at. But I think in a horror package, it can be accessible. I think Get Out is a great example of that, because it is a very accessible package. And that was a kind of, it's very artistically done, but it's also a bit of a popcorn movie that people can go see and with a big audience, and and laugh and jump and scream and have all those moments, and yet it's like dealing with very relevant, very important subject matter. So I think that's why people enjoy it.
Yeah, I'm a big horror fan, but sometimes I wonder why I'm so into it. But
Yeah, I
I,
mean, yeah, on a personal level, I think it more has to do with just kind of looking at the darker side of things, I guess.
hmm yeah, for sure. So, do you at all relate to the obsession that's sort of seen in Bloodthirsty? Is that relatable to you?
Yeah, I think so. Like film can be a really all-consuming artistic practice.
hmm
It's kind of unique in that way. You might have like lots of time off, but then when you're doing a project, it's just like you can't really do anything else. Like,
hmm
and so I relate to that aspect of it. I think what's kind of key that I'm trying to figure out for myself too is trying to find that balance between your art, but also the other parts of your life that I think Gray isn't able, as a character isn't really able to do, because she just kind of goes down this one path. But yeah, I think it's relatable.
Yeah, for sure. It kind of reminds me of that movie, The Red Shoes.
Oh yeah. Yeah. I watched that when I was a kid and I was obsessed with it.
It's a really good movie.
Yeah.
What are some of your favorite horror movies?
I mean, I always go back to The Shining. That's kind of just a classic for me and for obviously many people as well. I grew up watching lots of 70s British Hammer horror films, Dracula, Frankenstein, all that kind of stuff. And those are just such an interesting kind of world and color palette and, tone and stuff that's very specific, which I always really enjoyed watching. I'm a big fan of Cronenberg, so I love Videodrome. I love The Fly. Yeah, I love The Wicker Man as well. Actually, that's a film that I always go back to as well. That is just so unique in tone and vibe. Yeah, there's a few for you.
The Wicker Man's awesome. There's a really good documentary that I saw at South by Southwest called Woodlands Dark and Days Bewitched. And
yes, I can't wait to watch that. I've heard. I mean, I love her book, House of Psychotic Women.
Yeah.
So I'm looking forward to seeing that documentary. And yeah, like folk horror is definitely has an interesting history and kind of there's some stuff. I just went and saw the new Ben Wheatley film.
How is it?
It was interesting. Yeah, I liked it. It was maybe not as much as something like Kill List, but it was an interesting melding of like sci-fi sort of and folk horror. Like it's kind of like folk horror meets like Annihilation or something like that. So it was a really interesting meld of kind of ideas, but I was like, oh, this is an interesting take on folk horror, and it's interesting the way it kind of finds itself coming back into such a variety of movies nowadays.
What's that movie he made, A Field in England?
I haven't actually seen that.
It's good.
Yeah. I think it might be a little too on the kind of trippy end of things for me. Yeah, but I really like Kill List a lot. And yeah. Nice.
Yeah, I actually interviewed Kayla about Woodlands Dark, Days Bewitched, and you're going to be on the same broadcast as her. So there you go.
Oh, wow. Oh, what an honor. Yeah, no, I'm a big fan, and I can't wait to see that documentary.
Cool. Yeah, it's good. It's really long. In your opinion, what genre is horror most similar to?
I don't know. That's a tough question. I mean,
because I would say comedy.
Yeah, no, that's immediately what came to mind too, for sure. Because they're similar in the sense that it's a very strong reaction of, I mean, I don't buy into that horror films have to make you scared necessarily, but like the idea of like fear or laughter are kind of two ends of the same spectrum.
Totally.
And it doesn't need to necessarily be intellectualized either. It's a very kind of just basic reaction, which I think is also why sometimes comedies and horrors are both seen in a more kind of subpar light in terms of filmmaking. They're rarely recognized for like, things like the Oscars or just like the high art, low art thing. But to make someone laugh is hard, in terms of the writing, in terms of the acting, in terms of directing, like, and I think horror, you're trying to achieve an emotional response, which, dramas are as well, but there's something just a bit more kind of straightforward about something like comedy or horror. And even though they're different ends of the spectrum, there's overlap, and so many horror films draw on comedy as well. They might not be comedy horrors, that's a different genre, but like there's comedic elements because you need that kind of little moment of relief or whatever in certain films, like going back to Get Out as well. It's like, it was funny how I think for the Golden Globes, they had put it in the comedy category because they're just like, we don't know where to put this, which was just so absurd. And I think people were kind of calling it a comedy. And it's like, well, horror film has comedic aspects. It's nothing new, like those things are really intertwined in a lot of ways. But people sometimes just like don't know how to like parcel things and categorize things. And so they're just like, oh, I guess it's this or whatever.
So Bleed With Me was written by you. However, Bloodthirsty was not. How different did it feel to direct words that were not written by you?
Yeah, it was a really new experience for me because I had never done something like that before. And I was really excited to be able to kind of just sit in the directing role
Mhm.
rather than having those kind of overlapping things.
Right.
I guess the key difference too was I didn't have a lot of prep time for Bloodthirsty. I got hired probably 2 months before we started shooting.
Oh wow.
So that kind of added to the brand newness of everything comparatively to Bleed With Me, where it was like why I'd sat with those characters for so long and
Mhm.
sat with those ideas for so long. So when I was on set, it just all came very naturally. Whereas Bloodthirsty was a bit more kind of figuring it out as I went along, sort of thing, and trying to be like, okay, what is, what are all these arcs? What are the themes that we're looking at? All that kind of stuff, and the intentions and everything. So maybe there was a bit more. I mean, I love collaborating with the actors, and I did that on Bleed With Me too, but maybe on Bloodthirsty, I was like quite open for that because it was like we were all coming on board quite last minute, even with some of the cast as well. So, kind of just like learning on set a bit more, which was an interesting experience.
That's really interesting to hear. And maybe you could see the material differently or more. I don't want to say objectively, but like you could bring another angle from not being as invested in the words, I guess.
Yeah. I mean, I'm not precious about my own words either.
Okay.
So
All right.
if I'm very like, oh, let's cut this or whatever. So I
Yeah.
kind of brought that to both films, maybe a little less so because I'd maybe done that process in my own writing versus, doing that process again with the actors, maybe on set of feeling like, is this the right line? Do we want to change it? Do we want to, say it with a look rather than, dialogue or whatever, those kind of little details. So that was very much the process because the actors have to say those lines too. So
Mhm.
how do they feel about them? And actors have to live in the character in a way that I'm doing a million things. They're just thinking about that one thing. So I always really value what they have to say in terms of that stuff and in terms of kind of where their character is at.
Cool. Do you have any other scripts that are nearly ready to go?
Not that I've written myself. No, I
Uh-huh.
need to get back into writing. I think it's been a kind of hectic couple of years, and so I'm still kind of processing these two projects and stuff. And then the pandemic has definitely not been the easiest place to be creative for
No.
me personally, though I'm sure many people are experiencing that. So yeah, I'm not sure what's next.
Do you tell me about your writing process? How do you outline things? You just start writing scenes?
No, I definitely outlined first. On Bleed With Me, it was kind of a back and forth. I would do an outline and then write into script form and then go back to the outline
Hmm.
because I find you kind of get like you lose any objectivity in both formats.
Hmm.
Like even sometimes when you're editing, if you like watch the film on the, on Adobe or whatever you're editing on,
Yeah.
and then you like export it and watch it on Vimeo, it like looks completely different somehow. So it's like the format somehow kind of changes, like you're able to get a bit of a fresh take. So I found with editing by going back and forth rather than because at a certain point you're just like, I can't look at this
Right.
like document anymore, or I can't look at this script format anymore.
Hmm.
So I felt like it was helpful to kind of go back and forth. But I don't know. I find, writing for me is very like a means to an end. I don't know if I get much like artistic joy from the writing process.
Hmm.
I find it really difficult. And before I got Bloodthirsty, I was like, okay, what's my next film? And the idea of writing another feature was incredibly daunting. And I was kind of like, I don't even remember writing my other feature. Like I was like, if someone was like, oh, well, how'd you do it? I'm like, I don't know. It just kind of happened. And
Hmm.
I guess maybe I was so determined to make a first feature too. Like that was obviously I wanted to tell that story, but there was a really clear goal. And then kind of once you're done that, it's much more like, ooh, okay, well, what do I do now? And luckily I was able to do this second project. But yeah, now I'm kind of in that position again now of like, all right, what's next?
Cool. Well, really interesting insights, and I really appreciate your time. When can people watch Bloodthirsty?
Yeah, so it's available today in US and Canada on like iTunes, VOD, all that kind of stuff. And it's also playing at the Calgary Underground Film Festival for the next 2 weeks as well, if you want to catch it there instead.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for your time.
Yeah, thank you.